Okay, in this video we're looking at the final project for CS151. If you log in to the server, it's listed as an assignment. You can check it out, and we're going to look at the rules and such. There's a README file. So the project will be optional, so I'm only going to put grades in if you choose to complete it. It can count in place of your final exam if you want to do that. It can count for homework assignment, so that'll be up to you. For the grading of the project, it'll be 30% good programming style using reasonable variable names and following the recommendations from here. So you can look through there, and there's an example program that follows those rules. Okay, so we'll give you 30% of the points for the project on that. 50% will be using all the things that we know how to do in Python. So some functions to keep your code organized, ifs, loops, lists or dictionaries, one or the other, and reading or writing a file. So having these as part of your program in a useful way. Okay, and then the last 20% is sort of based on whether you complete the tasks, whether it's useful and interesting. Yeah, so somewhat of a difficulty or interestingness. So if you're going to work on a project, then you need to talk to your instructor first. And so you'll set an appointment. And if you're setting an appointment with me, then you'll use the link. So this is the link where you can pick and this is Jeff. So if you're meeting with Jeff, then you can pick your time off of here, chat by phone, Skype. Adam might use this, Ashwin might use this, so then you can pick a time to talk. And basically we're going to talk about what you want to do, and I'll give you a starting point. And as part of that starting point, there will be, I'll make a file up in here. So it looks like there's already one that has gotten started in Adam's class, but I'll make one up here for myself. So let's say that I'm wanting to do is going to do a project on the game of life. Okay, so that's a simulation. And then I would say we would talk through, and I would give you some starting point. Start with code from, there's a place where I'm putting code. So this code here could be a starting point. First task. So the game of life, the way the game of life works is we'll just look here, game of life. Not that game of life. No, not shopping. It's a different game of life. I mean game of life, Conway's game of life. Okay, so each individual spot is either alive or dead. And then there's rules about what happens to the next generation based on your neighbors. So if you have a lot of neighbors that are dead, then you stay dead. If you have a few neighbors that are alive, you become alive. If you have too many neighbors that are alive, you become dead, because the idea is resource, not enough resources for too many people. Okay, so my first task maybe would mean take the board starting code and initialize to have a few, let's say to have 2 cells that are alive. Okay, so that would be my first task. Then my second task, make a function that decides for a given row and column whether it will be alive in the next generation. Okay, so we would keep going through this, discuss for 15 or 20 minutes about what are the tasks to do. Then you would check it out. As usual. You have other people's files in there as well. You can look and see what they're up to, but everybody's going to be working on things that are slightly different. So the only one that really matters is the 15100, and so I'm going to edit my manifest. That is the only one that I'm going to hand in. If I had some other files as part of my project, I don't know, maybe there's some other text file that I'm going to turn in as part of my project. You put that in the manifest. Okay, so let's take a look at the README again. So you meet with us when when you're done. You make an appointment for a final review. We're not going to give you a grade without discussing. So you'll explain the project, answer questions. We'll make sure that you actually did the work and didn't have somebody else do the work. And that'll be due on or before the Saturday at the end of exam week. So if we don't have a final review from you by then it doesn't count. Here are some options that will be ready to help you get started. And you can potentially suggest another one. Okay, so option 1, COVID-19 data. So this link here if we go into the data, the time series data, and there are files for the number of confirmed cases in the US of COVID-19 and globally. And this is a CSV file that has for every county in the US that has had any cases, it has the number of cases, the total number of cases each day since January 22nd. So we can pull out individual counties and we can add up the counties in a state. Right, and do different things with this data. So there would be potentially something that you would want to do with the data for COVID-19. If we look at the README over here, here are some examples of things that you might want to do. So we could pick some of those out for you to work on to do something related to, okay, let's look at how this data grows or shrinks and make some predictions. Another option would be a pandemic simulation. So suppose you have a certain number of people infected by some disease. How does it grow over time depending on certain parameters? And okay, so I'm going to go through these. There are starting points for some of these here. So different things that might be useful in your project are there. You could check them out, and there's also video explanations of those. So for this particular, for the COVID-19, we would have potentially a CSV file. So this is just a small example CSV file that you could start working with, and you need to load a CSV file potentially. So there's a Python file to do that, and one of the videos at this link takes a look at that. For the simulation, there's one there that demos the simulation with a video to go with it as well. Two different thoughts on games. One is a first-person two-dimensional game, so you have some, let's say that you have some game board. There's my game board. There's my world, where it has a number of rows, a number of columns. You start out with your character at some position. You can tell the character to go left, right, up, down. If, depending on what is at the position, maybe my character's over here, it goes up, goes left, it gets to a period, and maybe a period means a bottomless pit and my character dies, or maybe it means something else. Okay, so the basic idea would be you're keeping a board and moving through the board, and when you get to certain things, something happens. To be able to do that, we want to have a board, and there is a demo board to get started, to have some kind of a board, and there's a video in there talking about that. So that would be one kind of game. Another kind of game would be something that's like a board game, or a one-person, like a puzzle game. So another thought there is Sudoku. We get you started with this board file here. We can adapt that to store a Sudoku game. So we could get you going with that, and then the idea would be the player can type in their choices to try and solve the Sudoku game. Another option that we're ready to help you with is looking at Indianapolis weather data. There's a link there with all days from 1950 to 2018. Over here is a small example, just the first 10 days. So for each day we have total precipitation for the day in inches, total snowfall, snow depth, temperature, high and low, and then the average is just the average of these two. So this is the first 10 days in that data set. The data set is 69 years of data, and there's questions that we could ask. Here are some example questions here. You might think of some others that you want to figure out from this data. In order to do that, you're going to load the CSV file. So you're going to go with this. There's getting started with loading a CSV file, and after that, it depends on what you want to do. Any other data that you can think of that might get stored in a spreadsheet, we can probably find a CSV file for it and then do something with it. Look for records, look up particular rows or columns, things like that. If there's something else that you have in mind that you'd like to do in Python, we can discuss it. Your starting point is scheduling a time to discuss, and we'll get you started. Good luck. Have fun.